Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Susan and if I sound a bit weird, it's because my boyfriend was away last weekend and he brought home a cold, so I'm sort of starting to lose my voice and I'm trying to make this video as quick as possible before I lose it completely. But I do have a glass of water nearby just to ease the suffering a little bit. So if you guys wouldn't mind me drinking in the video. And also I would also like to address something. I know I've been away for almost 6 months and that's because my grandma passed away very suddenly, and that really put me off coloring for some time, and I didn't want to make any videos when I didn't color anything, and yeah, that's the reason why I've been absent from YouTube for a while. But anyway, I've been I've been starting to color again, hopefully because I feel better now. And yeah, so I started to do some color alongs in February, and the first color along that I did was the bibliophile colorist color along, which was bibliofloral. And the first picture I did in that color along was from this book. This one is called it's called Flowers, the Watercoloring Art Pad, and that's the English name at least. By Rachel Peder-Smith, and my cat is meowing in the background. And yes, just a second, sorry. I'm sorry, my cat wanted out even though she's an indoor cat. But anyway, Flowers, the Watercoloring Art Pad. If you haven't seen this book before, it's a watercolor coloring book with some really thick paper, and I do recommend taking out the paper sheets out of the book, because that way you can tape it down on your table and really use watercolor without the paper buckling too much. So I did this, sorry about that. So I did this tulip with Kuretake with some Kuretake watercolors, and I really like how it turned out, except for this part right here. I think I sort of messed up the shading a bit, but overall I do think it was quite nice, and I really enjoy using the watercolors, and I'm sort of want to learn properly how to do watercolor, and I think this is a wonderful book to do it with, because you get sort of like a tutorial in the beginning, at least on, I think it's, yeah, free of the actual pages inside. I think 4, but then again, but yeah, and the lines are really tiny, and really, you really have to squint to see them, I suppose. But the paper is really, really nice, and that's why I like this book. And also I want to do more watercolor work. Oh yeah, and another thing, when I was doing this watercolor picture, I realized how to use different shades to make the illusion of light, if that makes sense. So I did use, so instead of just doing a, instead of using a pink and then go darker and darker and darker where there are shadows, I used excuse me, I'm just gonna take some water. I used some dark purple to do the shadows, and to contrast that I used a red that is more of a yellowish tone on the lighter area to make sort of a contrast, and I really liked how that turned out. So I used that to inspire myself in other pictures. Which is in, for example, in Skymningstimman by Maria Trolle, where I did 2 pictures. So the first one, I didn't do the shading that I did similarly used it. In the first picture, I didn't use the technique I did in Flowers, the watercolor pad, but I really like the idea of using watercolor. So I used some watercolor pencils in this, and then I shaded it with polychromos, and then I used some white gel pen to just give it some extra details. Like here in the flower, here, and on the heart. So I really enjoyed doing this one. And the second one that I have had the inspiration to do some complementary colors on opposite side was in this picture. Now this picture is very special to me because not only did I use, I'm just gonna try and do a better angle. One sec. Sorry about that, but I hope this is a better angle for you guys to see. So I used different techniques in this picture. For the first time, might I add also. First I did the complementary thing with the flowers to make it have more depth, I guess. And for the background I used the bokeh effect that I saw someone on YouTube, and I don't remember her name, but I will link the description to that video down below. And she made an easy tutorial that is easy to follow to do this kind of effect for the background. So I did use Kohinoor Mandaloos watercolor pencils, and then I shaded some of, I think I shaded some of the flowers with polychromos, and for the background I used, I think I mainly used if you hear that sound in the background, it's just the cat eating her food. For the background, I used Koh-i-Noor Mondeluz watercolor pencils, and then I used Polychromos, the white one that is quite in transparent white. So I also had help with some white gel pen and some Posca to make some of the circles more white. And then I used Kuretake pearlescent color to make for the drops in the spider web. So it has a little bit of a glittery effect. I don't know if you can see that, but I really like this picture because and that's my cat. She's walking on my coloring books. But yeah, I really pushed myself to the limits, and I did. Why this was so special to me when I did it? It was on Valentine's Day, and my cat is yeah, my cat is on the table. And yeah, it was on Valentine's Day, and my boyfriend was at the hospital, and I did this picture for him. He's fine now. He was just checking his kidneys, and he needed to stay there over the night. So yeah. Anyway, then the second color along that I did was for Shalene's Frogging Hopping February. And I did a frog from a tropical wonderland. I think Mila Murada's tropical coloring book is called A Tropical Wonderland or Tropical World. I'm not sure, but I have the Swedish version. But anyway, I did this frog in Polychromos almost entirely, except for a few places I used some Kuretake watercolors. I used the golden paint just to give a little bit of an accent. I hope my camera can focus now, please. But anyway, I don't know how shiny it is. Some of the accents is a little bit shiny that I didn't do in the things I did in solid colors or the watercolor. But yeah, I did that for Frogging Hopping February. Then for Sammy's coloring shop, which Sammy's Jasmine Becket-Griffith NASA, I did two. Yeah, I actually did two pictures in her Halloween book. So first off, I did this one, and for the background I used my Koh-i-Noor Mondeluz watercolor pencils, which are my favorites, and I used the same colors in the sky as in the cauldron, so they have sort of, you know, have a connection to each other. Oops. And then I used marker as a base layer on everything else, and I went over with and I went over with the polychromos. And for her dress, I actually had some Kuretake watercolors accents in her dress to make it a little bit more shiny. And I did a second picture. And here I just use a base layer with markers. I use Pro markers by Winston & Newton. And yeah, and I use a little bit of white gel pen, and I use polychromos and some Kuretake pearlescent colors on the beads that she's holding. And I've been experimenting a little bit with a technique which involves polychromos and just a marker blender. So I sort of used a Pro marker blender, and I sort of blended, with help with that, I blended the colors in this one just to smooth it out. But the thing is, you should be a bit do this carefully, because if you don't wipe off your blender, you might get some colors where you don't want colors to be. So I had some excess color on my Pro marker blender, and it accidentally smeared on this picture. But I'm going to try to do this whole picture with that technique that you blend with just an alcohol blender. So that's a neat little tip. And then I actually bought a new coloring book, and this is Tattoo Darlings by Hannah Lynn, and I wanted this book ever since it came out, and I was so happy with it, so I immediately did 3 pictures in it, and they all have a marker base and polychromos on top and some white gel pen. I really like how this turned out. And yeah, and I tried to do a color along that was in the Hannah Lynn group, but I haven't completed this picture yet. So yeah. Then I did this book belongs to page and in Phantomorphia by Kerby Rosanes. And once again, I used a marker base, and I used polychromos on top and some white gel pen, and I actually used a fine liner for the text. I really like how this turned out. And finally, the last picture I did was, or the last picture I completed was in World of Warcraft, an adult coloring book. I really like this book, and I would like to do a lot more in this book as well, because I'm a huge World of Warcraft fan. And I did this picture, which is the symbol for the trolls, which is one of the races that you can play. And I used polychromos and some white gel pen. And then I've been working on this one as well as part of a Asian themed for a color along, but I wasn't able to finish it in time. And I also used only polychromos and some white gel pen here and there. And lastly, the last thing I actually colored in but have not completed yet was Fantasia by Nicholas Filbert. And this is the first picture in here. And I used the same technique here with the Pro Marker blender just to smoothen everything out. So I used a watercolor base, and then I used polychromos to make the shadows, and I used the blender to smoothen everything out. But because the blender is an alcohol based solvent, it sort of, you know, goes through on the other side. And if you don't bother, if you're not bothered of it, you can just go ahead and use it. I'm going to cover all of this up at some point, so it doesn't bother me right now. But just in case, if you guys wonder, this will go through to the other side. And yeah, so if it doesn't bother you, if you're doing this on doing this technique on a single-sided paper, or if you are just going to cover it up later, then I do recommend this technique. But otherwise, just so you know, it will go through and you will have this sort of texture on the back, or blotchiness, or what you might call it. But yeah, well, thank you guys for watching, and I hope I won't be as slow with the next video, and I hope I see you guys soon. Bye!